We are very fortunate today to have as our guest one of the leading academic entrepreneurs in America. Dr. Christopher E. Hopey was named the 8th president of Merrimack College on July 1st, 2010. During his first year, Dr. Hopey engaged the college community in a collaborative strategic planning process to help Merrimack develop a clear vision for the future. The outcome was Merrimack's strategic plan called the Agenda for Distinction, which focuses on 5 strategic goals that altered the trajectory of the college by transforming it from an institution of promise to one of achievement. Reflective of that vision is a renewed focus on faculty, students, and enrollment. As a result, this past fall, the college welcomed the largest freshman class in its history and has added over 30 faculty members to its ranks who are focused on continuing academic innovation and maintaining a distinctive educational experience for the students. Under his leadership, the college has been ranked among the top 10 best regional colleges in the North Division 3 years in a row by U.S. News & World Report. The reason Chris Hopey is our guest today is that he is an academic entrepreneur. One doesn't often hear that term, but he's an experienced higher education leader who has brought Merrimack a strong academic and entrepreneurial background. He has more than 25 years of comprehensive leadership experience within very complex, highly decentralized colleges and research universities. He has a breadth and depth of academic experience that spans from innovative undergraduate and graduate programming to enrollment strategy to academic leadership and research. Please join me in welcoming Chris Hopey. But this is on.
That's on. Adjust. Well, thanks for having me. First, I haven't been in this auditorium in about 6 years, but it's very different because I'm a graduate of Northeastern and I sat in this room 27 years ago. And a lot of changes over those years, but it's great to be back at my alma mater. I love Northeastern. I have a double Husky, 2 degrees from here, then off to the University of Pennsylvania to get my PhD after my time here. I met my wife here 27 years ago in Spear Hall. My dad's a graduate, my 2 uncles are graduates, so I know Northeastern very, very well. And 5 years ago when I left Northeastern as a vice president, I went off to become the president of Merrimack College. So when George asked me to come back and speak about a design class, I'm like, I didn't really understand why at first. I'm like, George, what can I offer architecture students? But he explained to me quickly it's about design more broadly. So I want to talk a little bit about what I do, why I do it, and how I think about problems. Because ultimately, my life is about solving problems. That's what I do for a living. I do it in a university, college environment. But in any job you have in your life, those that actually solve problems end up doing the best and leading those organizations. My dad once told me, he said, you know, Chris, there's lots of people who sign pieces of paper. But at the end of the day, those who can think creatively, imaginatively, those that actually can solve problems, the ones that companies keep and want to grow and develop. So if anything you ever do is going to Northeastern is to remember this. At the end of the day, seek the highest type of job you can get so you can actually create and develop things. It's one thing to have 30 years of experience, 1 year, 30 years of experience, but 1 year because you've done the same thing for 30 years. It's very different to have a job where you have 1 year of experience every single year for 30 years. It makes you very different how you look at the world. So a little bit about what I do. So, you know, people think of managers as leaders running colleges. I manage people, I do budgets. Yeah, I do that, but I don't think of my job that way. I think of my job really as looking at, I review the past. History matters. Almost every problem you will encounter is something in some form that happened before, right? And it was solved in some way, but not the right way, because you're now trying to solve it again. So I always review the past. History really does matter. So many people, you know, forget about the past or the history and don't really spend time on it. I assess the present, you know. When I assess the present, I look at 2 things. I look at the talent involved in that problem, and I look at what's around it, what's the context for that problem that has to be solved. And I spend most of my time planning for the future. You know, at the end of the day, I cannot predict the future. I do not know what's going to happen. But I can plan for it and be ready for different scenarios that happen. It's one of the greatest lessons I ever learned. So I spend a lot of my time seeking and hiring faculty and staff and recruit students who want to be part of our community currently at Merrimack and make a difference in the lives of others. That's very important to me because I've met a lot of people in my life who are just there because they want a title, they want to make some money. But you cannot build an entrepreneurial organization if you don't have people who are there for the right reasons. So many organizations, in my opinion, universities in particular, get stuck. People become totally unable to move because they fear the future. They fear the present. And once that happens in an organization, they become stagnant. It's tough to move things forward. So everybody I hire, I ask one basic question. What do you want to be in 5 years? Write your resume for 10 years from now. What's it going to look like? I ask that question to anybody I hire. It's amazing how many people can't answer that question. They don't work for me when they can't answer that question. The best part of my job is I craft solutions to problems that ignite imaginations and make students and faculty more creative and vibrant. I create chaos. That's what I do. Anybody who's worked with me, George and others will say, I just create chaos, right? Because I think through chaos, good things happen, right? I think the kind of disruptive technologies, disruptive people actually make a big difference in the world. And some of the greatest ideas that solve world problems come from people who basically understand that they're going to create chaos along the way. I think I also develop opportunities for momentum that propels the institution forward and creates a sense of excitement and ownership for all community members. So many people in the world who run organizations make the mistake of not including everybody else, right? And what happens is you're only as strong as your weakest link. You can have the greatest ideas in the world, but it's impossible for one person to execute them. My experience has been if you don't include everybody, go through the process of involving them, have them a sense of ownership on it, have them have a stake in it, then at the end of the day, it will never sustain itself. People actually matter. You can be the greatest architect in the world, have the greatest idea, be the greatest business person. But if you haven't talked to people what you do and why, they don't use what you've developed. And you can name the buildings, the places, the things you've done, the companies that fail because people are not involved. I spent a lot of my time convincing people to invest in our momentum with their resources of time, money, and energy. Yes, some of it's fundraising, but some of it's actually going out to businesses to convince them to hire our students. Some is sitting down with alumni to come to homecoming. Others are about talking to the community about how we want to grow and develop and build. I spent a lot of my time with people, external people, convincing them to be involved and engaged. I think a big part of being a college president or any leader is to develop a culture of success, build for success. So culture actually matters in organizations. And I want to challenge the institution that I run to think differently, bigger, and to think outside the box. It's really important in today's world. There's a lot of things that are cookie cutter nowadays, you know? To be quite frank with you, Merrimack uses the same books that Northeastern uses, right? If you look at accounting is accounting, right? So what makes it different? What makes this class different from the class at Stanford or the class at MIT in design? Why? What's the value proposition of this class? Why do this? And so a lot of my time is developing culture and building the answer to those questions of how you build for success. And finally, I think my ultimate job is to improve the value proposition of the institution for potential students, current students, and alumni. You're not paying $200,000 to come to Northeastern for it to drop in the rankings. You're not paying $200,000 that in 20 years your degree is not worth anything. When I came to Northeastern as an undergraduate, it was ranked 167, right? There was no West Village. You didn't go across the train tracks, God help you wouldn't live, right? Okay? I lived in Whitehall. You could drive a motorcycle through it. We used to, right? All right? Whole different world, right? This campus has invested for 25 years in its future, done a great job, one of the great stories of American education in Northeastern. And this school is now highly ranked. My degree is worth that much more than when I came 25 years ago. And that's ultimately my job as a leader. It's the same thing with a building, right? If you're going to build a building. The John Hancock building is worth more than it was when they built it. It has more value to this city than it did when it came. It is an icon, okay? The Citgo sign by Fenway is an icon. They can't take it down because it has value, remembrance, when people think about it. Yet there's a lot of buildings, a lot of facilities that people want taken down the second they're built. So I spent a lot of time thinking of how do we increase the value of that school, that program, so the future generations benefit that much more from it. So I think there's 4 types of college presidents, and really 4 types of leaders, right? There are maintainers, and that is the vast majority of the world. Don't rock the boat, get through my 5 years, kind of move it along, right? And for some institutions, especially in higher ed, a lot of schools have enough money and they just kind of want to steady Eddie, keep it going, right? Now, there's also a lot of institutions that thought that 20 years ago and suddenly they're in trouble. But this is true for any business, right? Awful lot of automobile makers were developed in the 20s and 30s and 40s. They're not in business anymore, right? General Motors almost went out of business. It was for the government bailout. Why? Because they never addressed their problems. They never addressed the design issues, their union issues. They kind of kept passing off to the next generation. The presidents would say, you know, I'll give that to the next president, right? But the reality is that's a maintainer. Just kind of hold on, don't rock the boat, maintain it. And for some periods of time, that can happen. They're what I call prototypers. What I mean by that is it's people who dabble. They're not going to look at the core business, they're actually going to look at the side pieces. And they're going to create little programs here or there that are nice, right? They might create a new Corvette if you're an auto company. You might create renovate the 10th floor of a building, right? That's a neat thing, right? Of a 100-story building though, you know what I'm saying? The impact is not great, but they can put their mark on it and say they've done something. Builders. Builders are very important. They're the people that take the school with 1,000 students and make the school of 10,000 students, right? Quinnipiac is a good example of that, right? President's done a very good job building. And then there's those unique people that are entrepreneurs who fundamentally take an organization and move it forward. Northeastern has had a series of presidents that did just that. You don't go from 167 to 42 and be a maintainer. You don't go from 167 to 42 and be a prototyper. You don't go from 167 to 42 and just be a builder, right? The enrollment at Northeastern actually went down. When I went to Northeastern, there's 55,000 students in this school. 55,000. Now it's what, about 14 to 15? Very, very different. So that group of entrepreneurs are those people who think differently about the organization, are strategic in their thinking, and move forward. And I think actually that's the future of many businesses in colleges and institutions. It's true in government, right? The reality is government is in a maintaining mode. It doesn't work anymore by almost any measure. Look at the election, right? Yet, how do you fix that? It's going to require very innovative people. Our history has a record of presidents who can do that. FDR, right? If you go way back, was a US president that fundamentally had to change society to save everybody. If he didn't do what he did, the reality is this would probably not be the United States of America. It would be a very different place. So there's always moments in history where entrepreneurs come in and push the envelope and get organizations to think differently. And I believe that's true for college presidents. How I spend my time. People always ask me the question, how do you have the time, Chris, to do what you do? Well, I don't sit at my desk. I don't even have a desk. I have a study. I actually don't like big offices. I like small offices. I have a living room and a conference room because I meet with people all the time. I have literally a little study that's 10 by 10 where I have a desk in it with a computer so I can check my email. That's it. I don't have a big office with big glass. I think that's ridiculous. I want to spend my time in it. I spend my time in small places, right? Because I spend a lot of my time talking to people, students, faculty, alumni, stakeholders. I listen to their wants, their aspirations, their goals, their challenges, their needs, their frustrations, right? And I listen all the time. And I learn so much from listening to people. 10% of my time is learning about what other people do, what other colleges do. There is not a drive I don't take that when I see a college, I don't pull over and look at it. Look at their architecture, walk in their buildings. I learn so much about other organizations when I just kind of wander and look through it. And I've been on hundreds of college campuses in this country. And I'll show in a little while what I did around a problem we had at Merrimack around making a residential campus. I actually spent some time at Haverford College down in Pennsylvania and looked at how they created very interesting dormitories and other stuff like that and went back through it. I spent 25% of my time convening, organizing, connecting, and managing people. I spend a lot of my time bringing people together to talk about stuff. I spend a day a week just dreaming, strategizing, and designing solutions to problems. Because all the other stuff I do, I find lots of problems, lots of opportunities. And then I have to find the time for me. Every Thursday for me is no meetings, no time. I just read, I sit back, I talk, and I listen. I've done that my entire career. Otherwise, you can get caught up in all the drama of organizations, all the time and energy. You get nothing done. 8 hours is not a long time. It goes by pretty fast in a day. And so what I always tell everybody is, who works for me, how are you going to carve out 20% of your time to think, to do differently? And then I meet a day and a half a week with potential investors asking to help us out. I spent a lot of my time and energy selling and organizing the institution and what we're doing. And so that's what I do. I spend a lot of my time doing that. So we have kind of how we look at problems. So when I was at Northeastern, we had a couple of big issues, when I first came on board. One was, how do you teach languages in the future, right? So when I was at Northeastern about 9 years ago, they only had 6 or 7 language professors. Study abroad had no more than 100 people in it, right? We had to figure out, as the school changed, how you get more people to do that, right? How you organized language to be taught differently. And so we kind of did a very different process at Northeastern for doing that, which today I think is probably 40 professors in it, huge study abroad programs, tying the two together. That's a really hard process to do and think through it. So the first thing we did is we really assess and learn what works and doesn't work. We seek out opportunities to make a difference and solve problems. We talk, we listen, we involve our students, our clients. And that's ongoing, we're always doing that. But then when we come up with an idea, we then sit down and we plan, organize, we strategize. We spend a lot of time trying to looking through what the options are. We process and involve stakeholders. I think it's very important as you move forward in what you do that you spend a lot of time bringing in various stakeholders. Ask them what they think about ideas and plans. So at Merrimack, when I redid the library, I didn't sit there with the architects. I actually brought the students in and gave them carte blanche to redesign the library. Spent $400,000 for that process. I have a great library that students love to use and spend a lot of time on it. It's really wonderful. Then we seek investors and partners. We raised more than $1 million for that library project just by showing the ideas and how we created it. People got really excited about the process. And then we build, we execute, and we keep changing in the kind of the world of, we didn't get it right the first time. So here we spent $1 million. It's pretty good, but we get more feedback from students. And we went back in and spent more money to make it even better and change it. We also celebrate our success a lot. We spend a lot of time celebrating. I think a lot of organizations don't spend time celebrating. They actually spend a lot of time doing, but they don't take time to kind of take stock of what they're doing. And then we evaluate and assess, and we do it all over again. So that's how we spend our time. So we spend a lot of time doing that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the school I run currently, Merrimack College, and how we went about really transforming the school. And I should tell you, first of all, that I went to Merrimack because ultimately it was struggling. It's a small school, very different from Northeastern, very different from the University of Pennsylvania, where I was a dean. We made a lot of changes to it. But the reason it was struggling was because it kind of was a maintaining. It didn't really kind of change what it is. And so 5 years ago when I went there, they had not done any planning. So I spent a year bringing together all the various stakeholder groups, talking about, how do we, what do we want to be in 10 years? If I had to take another school and say we want to be like that or be like this, what would that be? And out of that, we decided we wanted to be a bigger school of 3,000 students. We want to be a top 30, what they call Master's Comprehensive, which is a category of school, where like the Villanovas and the Fairfields sit. We knew we had to expand science and business and engineering. We talked a lot about that. That's kind of the future. We knew we have a Division I hockey team that plays Northeastern every year, but the rest of our sports are Division II. We knew that going Division I was very important for the school. We got this all from the stakeholders. We focus a lot on student experiences, which I'll talk about in a second, because to us, ultimately, a student matters. At the end of the day, you come to Merrimack College because you want a different experience. Not a Northeastern experience, not a BU experience, not an urban experience, but a suburban experience in a very different way. We wanted to be a 24-hour campus. When I first went to that campus, it was built as a commuter school back in the 40s. The library closed at 7 o'clock at night when I came, right? The fitness center closed at 5 o'clock. It made no sense, right? But that's the way it was. And I remember at Northeastern that way many years ago, too. When I was a student here, you couldn't get in a fitness center on weekends. It was closed. The cafeterias weren't open on Saturdays and Sundays when I was a student here. You had to go eat someplace else, But the idea of focusing on your student really matters. And we went through a year-long process, 95 meetings, lots of conversations, and it involved more than 3,000 students, alumni, faculty, and staff. So what came out of that was really kind of 4 projects I'll focus on today. One was improving residential life on a small campus. One was creating a 24-hour campus. One was athletics, playing what we call with the big boys, how do we actually compete with other schools? And then creating an intellectually vibrant, modern teaching campus. So, improving the residential life on a small campus. So, like most colleges that didn't have a lot of money, they went to the one-size-fits-all plan, right? They built dorms, not homes, but dorms. So that didn't really kind of create a kind of an environment where people wanted to be engaged and involved. It was like a Whitehall big dorm with long walkways and a main lobby. What we knew is that we had to create more of a community, more of a home, more of an affinity. So we looked at Yale and half of it in other schools that actually built what we thought were kind of facilities that actually made it warm and inviting coming along. So this building I'm showing you here is the result of that. We created 350 beds in a small kind of condominium community where people come together, kids live in 6 or 8 kind of groups in a nice living room, and it really has created a different environment. Students can live there for 4 years. Once you come in, when talking to students, they didn't want to leave. So when you come in as a freshman, you can stay in 4 years, right? We know long term, by doing that, it builds, retention goes up. We know that students get more involved in homecoming and giving back to the institution. Where our senior class last year, their giving was almost 90%. Gave back to the school. When I came, it was 5%. So building this sense of affinity is kind of what we call the Merrimack Proud really mattered to us. You can see the village here, and we call it Warrior Village because we're the Warriors. We can do that. You can see it's a very inviting place. Now, kids love this. You can go on a weekend, and there'll be 200 people out there hanging out, having a good time. When we have spring bash, we have to stop them going on the roofs, but they have a great time, and it's their community. The students own this. And so we did other things too. So for example, we set up a fund for students, about $500,000 a year I give to the students to create their weekend activities built around these kind of affinity groups. So each one of these kind of houses, we call them, fits 60 to 70 people are by affinities as well. So we have one for the performing arts. We have one for the honors college. They organize differently. And now students are developing their own. Some are fraternities and others. So we kind of empower the students to do that. It really makes a big difference on the college. Where we used to have just kind of the old dorms of the 200 beds and bathrooms and this and that. These are all very different now. You can see what they look like inside. Students really like them. So the popularities have changed so much that now we're working on a second village. And I show you this map because someday some of you will be sitting in a room and you'll either be at a college or a company, and you have to think about economic development. And it's funny, I did not start off the college presidency thinking about economic development. But I actually realized that what I do really matters to the community I live in. In fact, matters more than anything, right? If I fail, the community around me will fail. Property values will go down. Crime will go up. All the things you don't think about. So we've spent a lot of time trying to figure out how do we take our college, which was most basically closed, and connect it to the community. So on this map here, you can see where you see the academic village, the academic building, the student commons. That was a big field that you just crossed in the past, right? And across the street from that academic building, we own more land, right? We want to connect the two together. And if you look at the ends of each one of these pieces of property, there's actually shopping in economic zones, of which you can't get to because it's a state highway. Much like you're at the train station here, right? It's the same exact problem. So we've been very creative and imaginative how we connect the pieces together. And so we realized that if we don't put housing, we could just build buildings there, but if we didn't put housing and students there, we would never be able to thrive as a campus, right? So we started thinking differently about how do we do housing. We still want the villages, but we really wanted to go differently. So we started working on what we call the kind of what it would look like. And this is ultimately, we're doing this project now, spending about $25 million to do it. But it's kind of neat stuff as you go through it and walk through it. I think the key for this is, and the key for all of you in your class in designing is, we didn't sit there and say, what does Northeastern do? What does Harvard do? What do others do? We looked at what other people did, but then we came back and we designed something for us. We spent the time and energy to design something for us. I teach a course at the University of Pennsylvania called Social Entrepreneurship. It was in the Wharton School, and it took education students and helped them develop business plans. And I remember, I had one group of kids in my class who went off and had this idea, which is at graduation, right? When you walk up, so on the big screen it's called marching orders, right? You'd walk up and you get your parents and they have these huge screens, right? And so they put this whole technology system together that's become a very powerful tool. Now that little company I started with those kids is now huge. Why is it huge? Because they actually spent the time to talk to parents about what they want to pay for when the kids graduate. And what they want to see is, in a big auditorium, they want to see their kid on the big screen. And we set these kids off. Now they do graduation for almost every major college or company. It's probably a $25, $30 million business now. Started from that idea. But if they had gone with their original idea, right, which was helping the college process to get people through to go faster, right, it would have never worked, right? So sometimes you see ideas, you have ideas of moving them forward, but as you talk to clients, as you talk to customers, as you talk to people, you begin to realize, good idea, but not the best idea, here's a better idea. And so this is how we've come at Merrimack to kind of think through what we do and how we do it. This is what the new facility will look like. So the idea is a small community, people come together and organize, right? And this is a view from inside that, looking towards the academic building. The whole idea for us is to build a community. That's one of our most important values, is a sense of community. So creating a 24-hour campus. So when I talked about the library for a few minutes, right? So when I came, the library was a traditional library. Turnstile, doors, books on the first floor, reference, the whole 9 yards. Hadn't been touched in 40 years. It was a snoozer, it was boring, right? So when I gave it to the students, they came up with some pretty wild ideas. One was a mood room with beanbag chairs. They're like, I'm going to be 24 hours a day, I want to be able to sleep, hang out with my friends and do stuff. So we have these mood rooms all over the place now where they hang out. The lights change depending on the day or the hour. When you go in at 3 o'clock in the morning, I can't get in the place. It's packed because it's students developed and engaged and created it. It's really kind of a fun thing. There are other spaces they want to create to get together. If you look in the background, we have lots of kind of, the one thing that students wanted to work on was how do we work together in small groups? So we've created throughout the whole library these kind of pods where students come together, they write. You can write on the walls now, it's all chalk driven. Nothing innovative, but if you look at the library 4 years ago, it was boring, nobody wanted to, even if you could get in at 2 o'clock in the morning, you wouldn't go in, it was not too good. And then they started talking about, well, I don't want to leave because I need to get something to eat, right? So they put a 24-hour cafe in. So you can come in, you can, and the students get to choose the food and change it. So it's seasonal, you get a great butterscotch pudding in it and stuff like that. So the funny part is we spend a lot of time, not just on the design, but the use of it and how it gets used. And we adapt and change it. We have a committee of students who kind of come together and organize that. The next thing we had was, how do I keep kids on campus, right? So we don't have the city like you have to kind of go and do stuff. So we need to create very innovative spaces that kids could do things. So this is called the 47 Lounge. It's actually the under 21 club. And what we do there is it's built for kids under the age of 21 to come in and hang out and do stuff. And so it's a very nice space that students use to come together. It is busy all the time. We have a kitchen in there, kids come in and do stuff. They can really kind of set their course. We do, again, I gave the students $500,000 to develop weekend activities. They bring comedians in, they have movies, they do karaoke nights, they do a lot of different stuff. My other problem was a lot of my kids would go off campus, over 21 and drink, right? And then drive back. That really bugged me a lot. So not a lot of college presidents do this, but I built a pub, right? And the students own that pub. They decide what it is and how they do it. And it's just, now they want a bigger pub with a bowling alley. That's what we're working on now. But the idea is that, again, we listened to our students, we listened to our clients, we spend time on it, and we design a campus for them. You can see what that looks like. They also wanted the fitness center open 24 hours a day. So we've done a lot of that stuff to fitness. We also find out from the female students that they did not like everything together, right? You'd be surprised, right? I didn't really understand that. So we actually built areas just for female students where they can work out and not be, basically feel in an inappropriate situation. So we really set up so they could do that. And now it's booming and doing very, very well. You can see that. So, problem number 3, playing with the big boys. So here you have a small campus when it came of 1,700 kids, 1,600 kids, right? Division I athletics, right, for hockey. Big deal there. Play Northeastern in a couple weeks, okay? Notre Dame this weekend. A really big deal. We get the majority of our student body go out for games. When I came, we had less than 300 people coming to games. Now we sell out every game is about 4,000. Every game is sold out. We have 15 games on national television every year. Kind of a big thing. We've really done a great job with it, right? But we had to build an environment. So John Henry, who runs the Red Sox, I saw them in an interview talking about how they could have built a whole new baseball stadium, but they didn't. They said they didn't want a bigger stadium. They want to build something that was really an experience. So if you look at football stadiums down in Dallas and others, they've really focused a lot on the experience. When you come in, what is it like? So we decided to create in a small school, in a small environment, a big-time experience. So we went and looked at Ohio State's kind of blue line clubs and their booster clubs and this and that. We went out and we built our own facility, right? So we built luxury boxes and blue line club. We brought in chefs and food. It's really top-notch. It's really world-class. And we sell them all out. We make money off of this. We make $25,000 a box we go out, right? Then I had to go out and I wanted more people to come in, right, to that arena so we could really sell it out. So I had to bring more youth hockey kids in. So I went and I partnered with somebody who gave me $10 million to build a youth hockey facility, right? We now have 1.4 million 7th, 8th, and 9th graders coming in every single year. Those kids are great. They want to come to Merrimack. We kind of build that up. We then decided that we wanted to even be better, so we put the bookstore in the arena and made it a spirit store. So now I'm selling, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of T-shirts and stuff like with the college's name on it every year. Again, this was all a design process. And at first, we had the wrong stuff in there. You know, we did the traditional books. We had all books. Nobody buys books anymore, right? So we turned it into a spirit store. We took away all the books and put in all new stuff. So as we built it, here I have the great new bookstore, nobody's using it. I went in and did all these other things. So I show you those to show it. And then we want to compete with the UConns and Northeasterns and others. So for a small school, and no school like us has this, we put in really great facilities to recruit more athletes and put that through. And then we started more sports. I started a women's crew team, and I started a golf team. I started a club sports, archery, all these different things we've built. You know, now the school is booming. We're really, you know, more than 3,000 students, really going strong, in a world where it's very competitive and different. So my fourth problem was, and I got this from students, how do we create an intellectually vibrant, student-focused, modern teaching campus? We're not a research school. We don't claim to research, you know, and we're very careful making sure my job is to really focus on what we do well, not on things that won't work, right? So the first thing we did is we created a thing called the O'Brien Center. I went out and got $1 million gift and went out and built a thing called the O'Brien Center, which is a one-stop for everything from co-op to internships to career placement. We just got ranked by Money Magazine 21st in the country for value added. What that measured was a kid who comes into Merrimack should expect to make this amount of money when they graduate. They actually make about $15,000 more than they're supposed to make because we really focus on job placement and getting kids good jobs. Our placement rate is 98%. There's very few schools in the country that do that high right out of school. When I came, it was like 45, 50%. We've really focused, brought a whole new team in, changed everything. We built a markets lab. Every one of our students in our business school gets certified to do Bloomberg so they can get jobs on trading floors in Wall Street. It's one of our big pushes in the school. Bloomberg uses as an example of what a great markets lab would look like. Those little terminals are what you would trade on. I've had traders at major companies like Fidelity come and say that we have a better trading room than they have, right? That cost me $300,000 a year. But to us, that was really important. That was one of the key niches we had to develop and do. And so it's about changing how people think about the school. It's built in this wonderful thing called the Innovation Center. And if you look, you can see in the background there, students come in and out of that room all the time. There's also where the Writers' House is and the Center for Teaching and Learning. We've created this whole new facility called the Innovation Center, where students come in and they get to experience these really intellectually vibrant kind of opportunities. The next was a Writers' House. And the idea there is that we bring about 36 to 40 kind of top-notch authors a year in. We bring in MacArthur Award winners, National Book Award winners, poet laureates. We do some great stuff. We bring these folks in. They don't come in just for a talk. They come in to spend an entire day. They start in the morning with breakfast with students. They maybe go to have a couple classes in there. They have lunch with different students. This could be business or English students. That depends on the area. And then they culminate the day in a large event for faculty and students. It's huge. This is the same thing the University of Pennsylvania has. It's become very, very popular for our students, and they really love it. Spurned out of this has been journals and literary journals, so all our students are creating opportunities to do things. It's really a great facility, and this is one of the things we had. And finally, this is a program we call Compass. So one of the things we noticed about students was we're about small. None of our average class size is 15. We don't have any class bigger than 35. That's why I hired so many faculty since I've been there, because that's what we expect, right? So I had to create spaces like, you know, a room like this with 15 people would be like, what the heck? So we've created very innovative, different spaces for students. This is an example one called Compass, right? Where students in this program come together in groups of 10 or 15 and work together all the time. We've done this in physics with Studio Physics. We've renovated and changed probably 80% of my classrooms. None of them are like they were when I first came, which was just a bunch of seats in rows. We've gone to flipped classrooms and changed stuff. But the whole idea is student interaction, working together. And so we constantly create those kind of environments. And so, you know, every school is different for everybody, but ultimately what I spent my time doing is listening. And I show you these pictures because I talk a lot about, at the end of the day, when I leave that institution and go someplace else, I have to ask myself one question. I said the same thing when I was at Northeastern. Did I do what I said I'm going to do? Did I achieve something that nobody else could achieve before? And do I leave with a sense of accomplishment and a sense of respect from others? Right? I know when I left Northeastern, I think that was true. I think I took a small college here, what was called University College, and transformed that from something that was very broken to really a national leader. I think at Merrimack we've done the same thing. At the University of Pennsylvania, I took a school of education that was struggling and made it 5th in the country. I think whether you're in business or engineering or science or social services, whatever your path is, you have an obligation as a designer to think that way, to push the future. Because if you don't, others won't. That's the one thing I've learned in my professional life, is at the end of the day, there's an awful lot of maintainers in the world. And if you don't become entrepreneurial, you don't become a prototype, you don't think differently about how you design programs. So all these things I showed you is because we go through a process, and that's an iterative process. It never changes. The Compass will be no good in 3 years. They'll want something else, right? And you just have to come to the conclusion in the modern world that everything has to change. It's just the way the world is going now. And those organizations that figure that out and do that, thrive. Those that don't, more and more, society won't protect them or invest in them, and they'll wither and die. So final thoughts, George, or come up? Right.
Well,
26 minutes, George.
Perfect. You know, there's so much to talk about with regard to understanding the changing nature of higher education today. I mean, the situation you're describing, which is one where one needs to be entrepreneurial because maintaining isn't going to cut it, that one will become completely irrelevant. I wonder how you would describe the forces that have changed higher education the most in the last 20 years. You and I have been participants in responding to or trying to get ahead of them, but what are the big changes environmentally, let's say?
So I think 3 things have changed higher ed. Will make it harder in the future to get a college degree. First is cost.
Right.
By any measure, higher education is an expensive endeavor, right? And the model we have is been around since the 1800s, right? It's a 4-year degree. It's
residential.
Well, even if it's not residential, still 4 years. That's a long time in one's life, right? It's a long time to take yourself out of the game, you know, work part-time, go to school full-time, get your degree. That's why, you know, most colleges, their retention rates are very low. People can go do a year or 2 and then they drop. That's why less than, you know, I think 34% of our society has a bachelor's degree, that's it, you know. And so more and more, it's getting more expensive, more difficult. The government's been pushing hard lately to change that. They politicized it, it's not that easy to change. So that's the first thing is cost, right? So we have to think differently about what you do for the future, right? And so one thing I think is gonna happen, one thing I'm working on at Merrimack is, I think for some students, say 30%, will go to a 4-year degree. They'll have the money, they'll have the parents, they'll have the wealth, right? Another 30% will only be able to go for 2 years. But they need a 4-year degree, so how do you do that? And then there's another group who can go for 1 year full-time, but need to, you know, can't go for the next 3. So I think what's gonna happen is competency-based education is gonna grow. I think this idea of experiential learning is gonna grow. The idea that you're not gonna do a co-op, but you may come to a Northeastern or a Merrimack and by the end of your second year, we're placing you in a permanent job. You haven't earned your degree yet, but you have a permanent job.
Right, right.
And so you've paid 2 years of tuition, and suddenly the tuition prices are going to go low, and through online and competency-based education, you're going to get the rest of your education, but you're going to be part of the community of Northeastern and Merrimack for a long time. So I think how we offer it, how you consume it, how you go through it is going to radically change.
This is, you know, it's a sense I have too. And certainly, we're not alone in this.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people have been writing about this. One of the things that's interesting is this whole idea about disaggregating what we understand to be a college degree now, a 4-year residential situation, is in fact multiple things. It's teaching. In some places, it's plus research. In some places, plus credentialing, plus maybe some other things. And I wonder, it seems to me that this fragmentation is likely to continue, and it sounds kind of like that's what you're saying when you say that there are these different constituencies that have to be responded to differently. Like if you can afford $200,000 in 4 years out of your life, no problem. You can get a traditional residential degree with all of the benefits that accrue to that. But if you're in a different circumstance, you may have to assemble it out of different pieces. Do you still see the Merrimacks and the Northeasterns and the Ohio States of the world being the umbrella organizations under which these things work?
I think more of a Northeast. So I got my PhD at University of Pennsylvania. Just an amazing institution, right? Just everything about it's amazing. Because of my degree from that school, I've never looked for a job in my life. Everybody comes to me. Yeah. Right? Yeah. I hire people from Penn. I hire people from Northeastern. You look at my senior staff, 80% of the people I hire went to either one of those schools, right? I have sent more undergraduates from Northeastern to Penn, telling them to go there. So what I think people get confused about higher ed is that there's a few institutions, Northeastern's one of them now, I believe, where the brand, the kind of the prestige really does matter in our society. We have a caste system in the U.S., right? Where you go to school matters. Right. There's not a cocktail party I haven't gone to where someone says, where do you go to school? Right. You will all experience that when you go to school someday. You chose well by going to Northeastern. My job at Merrimack is to make that same brand happen, right? But not everybody can be at that top level, right? So I think more and more you're going to have some problems in society where you're going to have the haves and have-nots, even with college degrees. Sure. So I think the key for leaders of these organizations is to continue to invest in the brand and make the experience great, so more students want to come and you get the job placement and all the attributes that make sense, right? I think for other schools, they're going to have to find out where they are in that market segmentation, the typology of higher ed, right? And make sure if they're going to be in a different sector, that they're going to be the best of that sector. Because I actually believe that we have some 4,000 colleges in the United States. I predict in 20 years, there'll be about 1,500 less. I just think they're going to go out of business. And I think it's going to have a huge impact. Now imagine going to school where your degree suddenly, your college you went to doesn't exist anymore. It has all sorts of social issues that exist. But I think we've overproduced. We don't have the mechanisms to bring people through. Not everybody can get a college degree. Not even a cost issue, it's even sometimes just a talent issue. And so I think there's going to be a lot of vetting out. This whole endeavor of higher education is only, for the masses, is only about 60 years old. It was really started after World War II with the GI Bill. It was started not, because that's what government financial aid started. It wasn't done because the government wanted more people in school. It was done because they were having 4 million veterans come back. They didn't want riots in the streets when they couldn't find jobs. So they sent them all to higher ed. And that's the great path, the golden era of higher ed. It's now in transition.
Well, it seems like you and I both, I think, have experienced this. There's two ways that there were maybe two engines for that growth in higher ed. One is, of course, a burgeoning demand, the baby boom and so forth. But it's also been, and this may be why we have overproduced, it's also been a bit of a supply-driven thing in the sense that there were a lot of people, I think, who were attracted to the idea of working in higher education. And this became a viable kind of more large-scale alternative. I mean, it didn't used to be the case that there weren't that many universities, there weren't that many faculty positions and so forth. The whole issue of supply-driven focus versus demand-driven, I think has everything to do with the sort of empathy part of looking at higher education. In other words, is our objective to do everything we can to improve the outcomes for our students, or is it for me to teach what I want to teach? This is a big battle at universities.
Well, you know, I think that higher education generally is considered a social good, right? Most places in the Northeast is a nonprofit, right? It has a special charter from the state of Massachusetts to give degrees because it is social good. It has certain rights because of that. Tax-exempt bonds, doesn't have to pay taxes, has certain laws that allows it to do what it wants to do. That's separate from a for-profit company, right? There's a lot more degrees of freedom. And in return for that, we offer a public good. But higher education starts with a concept of rejection, which is not a social good. We start on day one with rejecting people, and we move from there, right? Everything we do is about rejection. It's about, if you don't do well in your grades, you get rejected. If you don't, you have to go through tenure. If you're not good enough, you get rejected. The whole system is based on rejection, which is opposite of what the social good is. So I think the oversupply is a result of the fact that we have a misnomer in the industry between selectivity and rankings and all other kind of stuff. And the reality is, this is a social good. It's a public good. The government could decide to take away that right, and suddenly everything changes. You know, suddenly you got to pay taxes. Suddenly you can't go borrow money. Suddenly the whole field gets screwed up. And so I think for a lot of people in our society, they take it for granted, that whole rejection system. But being an 18-year-old kid going through that process, that's pretty tough. You know, that kind of goes against. So what happens is, you know, you have the pecking order, right? And so you go all the way down to the bottom where open enrollment, you know, state colleges. But, you know, should we hold them the same standard that we should offer to a Northeastern or a Harvard or something like that? So to me, the supply, the market side, you know, the race to be Harvard, Penn, or Yale is what drives that behavior, right? Prestige, status, all the stuff that goes with it. But that's not a public good. That's a private good that deals in a marketplace in a very different way.
Well, that raises the question of, I mean, something that has exploded in our professional careers, which is either for-profit or quasi-for-profit operations, much more market-driven operations. So I want to just ask you, I'm going to give you some actual examples, but take them to be illustrative of categories of types of institutions. So we have things like Southern New Hampshire University, which is a very entrepreneurial school, maybe at one end of the spectrum, and at the other end of the spectrum, maybe the University of Phoenix or Kaplan or various things like this. Why do you think they're happening? Do you think they are doing a good job? Do you think they are serving the public good in one of these different ways that you're talking about?
So yeah, I mean, I probably have different views than other people have in this. So I think actually for-profits are good. I think they actually do a better job serving the public good than a Northeastern does. They, generally speaking, most people who go to the for-profits are students at the lower level. The problem with that is that those students need more help and assistance, and it's tough to make a profit off of them. So you need more of them, and that's the problem. But in some ways, they serve a social good by doing that. In some ways, they serve an individual kind of problem because they're trying to make money off of people who probably need more support to learn. That's been the problem with the whole model, right? Is that if you're running a company, you have to make value for your stockholders, right? And so you have to increase that value by making more money, and you bring more people in. This is why gainful employment, all these other laws have changed a lot. But I think for anybody in a design class or thinking about the future, I think more and more the society is beginning to look at, is the for-profit model the right way to go with this? The government currently is just kind of turning against them, right? Because of what I call I don't want to say the crimes, but the kind of the sense of it's a public good, but it's people getting loans and not paying their benefits, not getting jobs. What's happening there? The Southern New Hampshires, I think, are very interesting models. My only problem is that you know, they start off as what are they now? Are they an online school? Are they a campus-based school? You know, they can't even get ranked anymore. What does that look like? So
I didn't know that.
The most important thing, I think, for an institution is mission. Why do you do what you do? You know? So when I went to Merrimack...
What is to put it another way, what is the problem that you were trying to solve?
So exactly. What's the mission? What's the value proposition? So you know, when I was at Northeastern, I built Northeastern Online. It's a very large, very successful business. I built it from scratch here. There was no online at Northeastern before I came. We built it. As you know, it's a huge business. I would never do that at Merrimack. It's not part of our mission. It just doesn't fit. So.
Well, tell me, let's go into that a little bit, because I mean, I'm aware that you did that. I don't know a lot of the details, but why was it an excellent fit at Northeastern? Why did it add, you know, value? Obviously, this is a multi-pronged thing. One is generating revenue and resources for a larger academic mission, but I don't
Sure, so let me talk about that. So you know, a lot of students probably don't know this, but Northeastern started at the YMCA, right next door here, more than 100 years ago, basically as serving adults part-time in the evening. That's been its mission. It grew in the 50s and 60s and 70s because it built upon that mission a thing called University College, which at one point had 100,000 students in the world in it, and taught at high schools throughout New England, something like 70, 80. That whole thing has spurned other schools. Roger Williams College in Rhode Island was a branch campus of Northeastern University 50 years ago. So it had a long history of doing this, then the Lowell Institute, all the stuff it does. So it's part of Northeastern's history was University College. But the idea of offering a place like Northeastern offering courses in high schools just doesn't make sense with the new Northeastern. So my task was to create the new model, right? And we felt that the right way to do that was to go online and create a high quality kind of program that students could take online that would kind of its DNA was really that working adult, and do that in such a way not to distract from the new mission of Northeastern, but actually to keep that DNA strong and going. And so we built an online business to do just that. And it serves the public, it serves the social good very, very well. And we're very proud of that.
So in that case, the problem to be solved was reinventing the access model that the university had started with for the contemporary time.
For contemporary time, and doing it so it kind of kept up with the times, did it right, and it was very successful.
Well, I want to ask you about online education because, of course, you know, everybody and their brother has a point of view about this, but this seems like the perfect topic for which understanding clearly what problem it is you're trying to solve is essential. Let me just lay out a little bit of a diagram and we can talk about it. The first problem to be solved by online education, let's say, which is in something of a conservative political fantasy, is the idea that everything will be a giant MOOC, massive open online course, and that one person will teach hundreds of thousands of people all over the world at a cost virtually, you know, zero per individual student in order to solve the world's education problems. You can tell by the way I'm describing this that this is not the most persuasive argument thus far. Number two is not about scaling up the President Chris Hopey expertise to reach 250,000 people. It's about something very different. It's about me being able to take the Chris Hopey course when I'm in Atlanta or in Seoul, Korea, or in a distance learning kind of solution. I mean, those are the two biggest, I would say, most different problems to be solved. What are some others? Well, what do you think of those?
Yeah, so you know, it's really about what you're trying to do. So take this class right here. There's probably 150, 200 people here right now, right? 75% of you aren't even paying attention. You're just doing your little thing right now, right?
Yes. That's correct, yes.
That is correct. Yeah. And that's probably true almost every class. Yeah. I've sat there in Blackman Hall, this was 35 years ago, the same thing. Yeah. But that's because it's about content and learning that content and navigating people through it, right? And that's the idea of the MOOCs, is that ultimately it's not about attention spans or paying attention. It's really about the navigation of a set of knowledge, right? So MOOCs are popular at the 100,000 because people want to dabble in that content. They want to spend time and just, they don't want to have to be intentionally learning. If you're in a class of 15 kids and I'm teaching a class of 15 kids, if you're not paying attention, we're going to know in 5 seconds and you're not going to get anywhere gone, right? It's a whole different kind of model. That's an expensive, different kind of model. But in the world of MOOCs, or large classes, you know, I mean, it's a very famous story. The University of Illinois had an accounting class taught by a dead professor for 10 years, but they put him on video. And he taught the class for 10 years. He was dead. And he taught it for 10 years.
I aspire to this, by the way. I aspire to be teaching from the grave.
So it's different, but I think every student's different. So my wife has taken a MOOC course now at the University of Berkeley, right? It's on mindfulness, right? Another thing I know anything about, right? And she sits down, she watches the video, she learns, she takes notes, but there's no pressure on her. There's no testing, there's no I gotta be on all the time. I gotta do it. It's a different kind of academic experience. And for her, it's wonderful. But she dabbles. She doesn't have to pass a test, isn't gonna use it for the rest of her life. It's something she just wants to know more about. And so MOOC, that's a powerful access tool for people who want to dabble intellectually. If you look at the MOOC's results, 95% of people take them, never take the test, never finish it, never do it. But I think it's a good way to get access to stuff, because this is what's important for anything you do in your life. I've been successful not because I have a Northeastern or Penn degree. I've been successful because I'm a college president. I've been successful because I'm curious. I learn for a living. I'm a curious human being. I spend my time trying to learn about others and what they do and how they do it. And that's how I do it. And that has served me well in my career and what I do. If you're not a curious person, if you don't care, nobody will ever, people come to me and I know in a second, you're looking for a job, get out of here. Okay? I have fired thousands of people in my life.
This is the first,
thousands.
The first way I knew you.
Right? Yes. As George knows, I probably fired a couple hundred people when I was at Northeastern. Right? At Merrimack, probably a couple hundred more. Right? People don't think a college president's doing that, right? I don't do it because I like to. I do it because I have to change the organization, move it forward. And that a lot of those people, a lot of them had college degrees. I always talk about how I've fired more people from Harvard University with degrees from Harvard, right? Because I'm not interested in people who just want to sit there and want to pick up a paycheck and kind of do the minimum. I want people who want to challenge themselves and challenge the future, be curious. That's how you make great things. You make great things by being curious and challenging. And when institutions of higher education don't push the students to do that, nothing happens. MOOCs are dabbling. I don't expect anybody who's in a MOOC to go off and invent the greatest thing in the world.
Sure. No, I think that's, and nor do we expect that. By the way, one thing that's healthy when talking about online teaching is moving away from the assumption that the way we do it now must be ideal. That like everything we're doing right now is perfect, and that any movement to some other model must compromise. Well, no, in fact, it might make it better. And the one I didn't mention, the option I didn't mention between MOOC and the sort of distance learning model was the improved pedagogy model, the sort of flipping model that says, actually, rather than listen to somebody talk for an hour or plus twice a week, you can look at something online that you actually have to respond to every 5 minutes. You have to give feedback. And I think the evidence I've read suggests that there's far greater retention doing that than listening to lectures and getting an exam every month.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I had a class at the University of Pennsylvania, and it changed me forever. It was an organizational dynamics course, the guy named Peter Kurloff. There was 20 of us. It was like an intense 20-hour course, right? And I walked in, all 20 of us, and he walked out and didn't come back for 24 hours. I was in shock. But by the time we got done with that class, I learned more about human beings and how they didn't work. And it was an experiment. That's what it was, an experiment. It was a typical prototype class. In that class, people fought. Some people had to be in charge. It was nuts. It was nuts. It was like those movies Lost. We were in a classroom by ourselves. We weren't allowed to leave. We weren't allowed to leave. And it was over 3 days and 8 hours a day, and we weren't allowed to leave. And we all showed up as automatons the next morning, and we sat there with no agenda, it was just nuts. And then he came back and he went through a 2-hour process, asked us, what did we learn? And it was fascinating how we all talked about human beings, interactions. People had mourning when they left that class because they developed new friends. I have a friend from that class, still to this day, one of my best friends, because we kind of clicked together, organized myself, and I realized how human beings behave and how they react in organizations. And these were all, PhD doctoral candidates, very successful people in their lives, but that was a class. And so I don't add to reading lectures or doing work. I actually think it's more about the experience and what it's all about. And I know from my experience in my life, there are a few people that I took classes with that fundamentally thought about being different. When I left Northeastern, it was 167. It was a blue-collar school. It was, I worked at Huntington Liquors, had to pay myself through school. I went to school here. Right. And I got into the University of Pennsylvania, and I was shocked. And then I went there, and I'm like, okay, Ivy League school, a lot of famous people, a lot of people went to the Ivy Leagues. I was petrified, you know, and I got there, here I am, a graduate student, and after about 2 weeks, I said, either I am the dumbest person in the world and I'm going to fail, or I can do this, right? And lo and behold, I did. I figured out how to do it, and it was great. But the Northeastern experience did that. And so I think actually, in some ways, it isn't so much the classes you take, it isn't what you do, it's actually the challenges you challenge yourself to and how you do that. And so I think books can do that for some people and not for others.
Well, you know, what you're suggesting is that the kind of, as we migrate towards the final section of this class where we're going to focus more explicitly on experience design, thinking of universities, first and foremost, not as the accounting book, because we all use the same one.
Yep, it's the exact same book.
But the experience of the education and foregrounding that as that which distinguishes universities. Northeastern would obviously be about like experiential education, engagement, interaction between application and research. How would you talk about Merrimack in that same vein?
So we're very different. So we really focus on experience. So really small class sizes, lots of faculty interaction, right? The majority of our faculty on campus all the time. It is not uncommon for our faculty and students to know each other for 20, 30, 40 years. So it's a completely different experience. Right. There is a lot of, like if you don't go to class, we just go get you out of the dorm, we know where you are, literally. So it's a fundamentally different kind of experience. At the same time, it's a very nurturing environment. You know, we have a saying, we make good kids great. Right. And that's what we basically say. Right. Students are fundamentally different than Northeastern kids, you know. And that's our niche. That's what we do. We do it really well, and we create very successful people. Right.
Well, let's talk about one of those differences. It is a Catholic institution, and what we talked briefly on the way over. But what are some of the real differences between leading a religiously oriented institution versus a more secular one like Northeastern?
Yeah. So I can talk a lot more about values and mission. Social justice, and have it resonate with the whole student body, you know what I mean? It's actually easier for me to do that even than some of the priests, right? Because those could be controversial topics, right? We can take stands on certain things that we want to that other schools couldn't.
That's right.
You know, I don't have to, being a private institution and being a Catholic institution, although we don't do this, you know, we have Mass a lot, and it's, you know, it's a time for reflection. People spend time on it. It works for some kids, and some other kids it doesn't. You know, but it has a lot of traditions to it that I think a lot of people like and enjoy. And so we've been very successful in recruiting students for that.
I take your point about, I mean, this is just interesting. It's true, at a Catholic university, you can actually advocate for a ethical, moral position.
Yeah.
Whereas here, or at a private institution, what you have to advocate for is a kind of even-handedness, or that's a freedom of speech issue, or
we don't have to do that.
And that's interesting. I mean, this is a little bit superficially. This is a little bit off the topic of the education itself, but not really, I guess.
No, I mean,
because you take that as part of the mission of the institution.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like running a company. You know, Google, you know, has a certain philosophy, a certain mission. As a private company, they're pretty expressive about that, right?
Right.
You know, Apple's another one that's very expressive. They actually just went against the government and decided they were going to lock all these new things so the government couldn't get into it. That's pretty controversial when the federal government, you know, wants to kill you for doing that.
Right.
But they did it because they can as a private company and do that, because what they did before kind of screwed it up. If you were a, you know, a government agency, you wouldn't have any choice to do that. You know, if you were in a company that didn't have such, you know, good old government contracts like a defense contractor, you wouldn't dare do that, right? You lose your contracts. But a private company like Apple can make a stand, you know, same way they made a stand on where they're going to manufacture their products, what they're going to do. That goes down to the ethical, moral leader. And I think, you know, it's no difference of, you know, Ben and Jerry and making sure they never earned more than 10 times what their line employees. You know, at Merrimack, I just gave all of our service workers, and we're doing really, really well financially. And so instead of just putting in the bank, I gave all of our service workers and all of our police officers, a mid-year 10% raise.
Wow.
Don't happen in a lot of places, but
no, it's not.
I morally have an obligation to do that.
Right.
I morally have an obligation to share our success with other people. That's what's different about a Catholic institution.
No, well, I think that's great and interesting, and it really actually begs the question, though, in this larger. I mean, this is why you're such an interesting figure, I think, for the higher education conversation, because on the one hand, you're at an institution that absolutely takes seriously its ethical, moral place in the world, but the market-driven nature of higher education over the last 30 years, many people would say, has transformed that conversation dramatically. Now, maybe you can tell me why that's wrong, but you know, most people would say, or how about this? I'll take some responsibility. I would say that since the early 1980s, when U.S. News and World Report became the de facto guide for American higher education, it changed the performance criteria significantly.
It could, but if you look at those criteria, actually, admissions is really the least important part of it. There's one called faculty resources, which really talks about how much money the institution spends on instruction in terms of faculty salaries, all that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
Yeah. The other one is retention and graduation rates.
Right.
That's how much the school supports its students in its success.
Right.
I have a basic saying at Merrimack, and I had this at the University of Pennsylvania. And Northeastern didn't necessarily have it the same way, having been here and being a graduate. If I let you into Merrimack College, you will succeed. I don't care if you're the dumbest person in America, I'm going to make you smart. I'm not going to let you fail.
Right.
So, and that's kind of a moral obligation that we have. University of Pennsylvania had a saying that once you join the family, you never left.
Right.
And I think, you know, in the marketplace, you know.
Does the American Culinary Institute have that same commitment, or whatever the one that?
I would say that's a top-notch school, by the way.
Okay, perhaps I'm. But you know, these, I don't even know if I'm citing the right one, but the for-profit institutions.
No, I think it's about volume, it's about making money, it's about their stockholder is not their stakeholder, right?
Right.
We have stakeholders, which is our graduates and our alumni, and my job is to make the brand of the college better. Just like it's Joseph's job here to make that. He's done a good job with that, great job with that.
Right.
The fact that Northeastern's ranked 42 in the country is amazing. It should something to be extremely proud of.
Yeah.
And something that a lot of students in this room won't understand until 20 years from now. But as an alumnus from a long time ago with other alums, you know, there was a time when I kind of said, yeah, I went to Northeastern, right? Now I'm like, I'm a graduate of Northeastern, and everybody notices that. That matters. That brand value, that market, that really means a lot as an alumnus, you know? And then my co-op experiences, you know, you go to Ohio State, they talk about the Saturday football, right? Football game, right? And there's not a single alum now that I'm about to be 50 years old from when I was here 25, 30 years ago, okay, that I don't see where we talk about our co-op. What do you do for co-op? What do you do for co-op? And we like brag. I went to John Hancock. I went to Metcalf and Eddy. I did this, you know. I mean, you know, it is. The funny part is the rest of the when I was here it was considered vocational and you know not the thing to do. Now everybody wants to do it. You know, it's like how many colleges are, you know, what's the flavor of the month? But Northeastern has the market on it, and done a great job with it. So sometimes when you stick with your values, you stick to your DNA. Long term, it pays great dividends, right? It's like investing in a stock. If you sell short all the time, or you sell when the market goes up and down, right? But if you stayed in the market for the last 8 or 9 years like I did, you do pretty well. Ups and downs, you just kind of have a steady approach to it. And I think that's also important too.
Well, it's probably not a question that we can answer at this point because it's speculative. But I do wonder, as you know, higher education has, as it has not served a large portion of our population that we need to have educated as a country. As we develop models that will serve these larger communities, I wonder about some of the other traditional roles that higher education has been able to play in terms of ethical leadership or
So I don't think everybody needs a college degree, by the way. I think that's a misnomer. I think it's a great falsehood. I think it's actually great disservice to our society that everybody should have or should aspire to a college degree. You know, some of the wealthiest people in the world never went to college. So I always say those people who are curious and imaginative are the ones that do well. Doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's actually a good thing to have more people educated. But there's other ways of getting education, other ways to do stuff. But from the sense of the role of higher education in society and going forward, it's not just about educating young people. It's about creating knowledge and opportunities. It's about creating problems. If you look at research universities and the work on cancer and health, having a mother who passed away a couple years ago who had diabetes since she was 4 years old and lived in her 70s. If it wasn't for the advances of Harvard's medical school and Stanford and others and the work they did, she would have died in her 30s. I mean, they kept her alive for another 40 years. And all of us have loved ones and others who are alive and doing well, and they shouldn't be, simply because of the advances of higher education institutions and doing research and creating drug discovery and other things that just simply makes life better for many, many people in this country. Right. Now the key is how do you get that to other parts of the world, Right. And how do you do that? And all the doctors and the private companies that we've educated to think that way about things from Ebola and this and that, you take away universities from that system, none of that would ever happen. We'd be a much worse place, society. So I think in areas of health science and the world of engineering and all these technologies that you sit in your hands, all this stuff, the stuff that we all get focused on, that's all in some way created through patents and others of companies that are co-done with universities. Google would not exist if it wasn't for Stanford University. Apple, all those companies have generated the talent comes out of a place like that in a very different way. And so to even say like a place like Stanford's even a university anymore is kind of, I think it's a very different kind of organization. And I think, but even like in a place like Northeastern and stuff that's been created out of here, I mean, a lot of people don't realize, but you have a school, a guy named George Baracus Hall here, right? Well, George, was one of the inventors of the catheter, which at the end of the day has saved millions of people in their lives in hospitals, right? Made him a wealthy man, but at the same time also did a lot to help mankind and invented out of a pharmacy program here many, many years ago. So there's those kind of inventions that happen that I think make a really big difference.
Right. I'm going to ask Kate now to share a couple of our student questions with us. And anybody else, if you'd like to get up at the mics, of course, you're more than welcome to.
What are some of the constraints or limitations that you deal with as you work to develop the agenda for distinction, your plan for Merrimack's future?
Oh, that's great. Nobody believed it. I took an organization that had 15 years, 8 years of no pay raises, 15 years of fighting with the president. They couldn't believe they could be better. When I came to Northeastern, took a university college. No one believed there could be a cutting-edge, world-class institution in adult world. People just thought, shut it down, get rid of it. I even said that, But I think at Merrimack, I spent most of my time convincing people, don't worry about barriers or money or people or personalities, to dream, think differently. And I think, they just didn't think I've raised faculty salaries almost 40% since I've been there.
That's astonishing.
And do stuff that makes a difference in people's lives. Or, we had, when I went, we'd have 300 people at a hockey game. Now all is sold out. We used to have 400 people at homecoming. We have 8,000 people at homecoming now. Why? Because they do tailgating, all the other fun. I make it an event, and it's an experience, But nobody believed that we could do that in a short period of time. And it was just basically convincing people that anything was possible if you dreamed and if you worked together as a team and moved it forward. And that's what I do. And I think the place believes now, It's hard to manage those beliefs, but that was the biggest constraint I had. It wasn't money. I make money all the time. I have no problem going and raising money. When I was here, I didn't give me any money. George knows that. Deans don't have any money. But I made, hundreds of millions of dollars at Northeastern and did very well with it. But nobody gave me any money. No one said, hey, Chris, here's $10 million to go invest in stuff. Nobody ever gave me a single dime. And if you ask most entrepreneurs, when I taught my courses at Penn and some courses when I taught here in social ventures, I bring entrepreneurs in and said, nobody gave me any money. I used my credit cards. That's how I started my business. I kind of bootstrapped it. And that's how I think as an academic entrepreneur. I mean, everybody comes to me as I need 5 faculty positions and 4 things. I'm like, get out of here, right? But if you have an idea, let's talk about how we can get it started, how we can prototype it, get it going, move it forward. So I had lots of constraints. I had no money. I had nobody believed. I had lots of people angry and mad. I had people underpaid, low morale.
But other than that, it was fine?
But I'm used to that. That's how When I was at University of Pennsylvania, we were ranked 21st in the country at grad school of ed. Now, that seems like a big deal. At Penn, if you're ranked 21, you're in trouble. Right. Maybe you just don't. 21 doesn't fit in the paradigm of the thought process. We got the 19, and we got the 15, we got the 11 and 5, and people are like, how the heck did that happen? And we focused on some key things, and trying to make the experience better. And we started a thing called the Exec Doc in higher ed and a thing called the Mid-Career Program. And I knew Harvard couldn't do it. It was a weekend doctorate at a place like Penn, right? And I got through the faculty. It was really simple. I just made sure they were all happy and took care of them and moved that forward. And so it's you know, sometimes for me, it's a combination of looking at, I just don't look at problems as there's barriers, right? Unless there's an earthquake and the earth opens up, everything is man-made. It's all man-made. It's all self-inflicted, right? You can get over that pretty fast. You can think creatively, imaginally about how do I look at this problem. And I have found that it's about people, one-on-one with people. You know, Ted Kennedy was a great senator. Do you know why? Because he spent time with people. The guy was just, Bill Clinton, plus, if you ever met the guy, I've met him a couple times, he just is so able to make you feel like you're the most important person in the world at that moment. There's few people who have those skills, and I spend a lot of my time and energy doing that. George knows that. You know, when I was at Northeast, how much time I spend talking to you guys about ideas and stuff like that all the time. So that really matters. If you're not a people person, it's very tough to be an entrepreneur, in my opinion.
Kate, shall we try one more?
What are the qualities that you're looking for in the employees that you hire and the students that you accept?
So employees, I want you to be able to fail and keep going. For every 100 ideas I have, 90 fail. Crash and burn. I can tell you things just, oh my God, we screwed that up. And just keep moving on. If you're not willing to fail, you will not succeed. You only learn from failing, right? The job of him, the job of me, is to set it up so when you fail, you don't go off the cliff, right? But if you don't fail, you know, when I used to teach, I make sure the first test nobody passed. Why? Because I had 80 kids in my class, 40 would leave. And the other 40 I knew was serious and wanted to learn. You know, the dean didn't like me very much when I did that, but I'm like, tough luck, right? That's how I taught, right? And then those other 40 kids, a lot of those students, to this day, I still stay in touch with and still do stuff, you know? But you have to be willing to fail, and that's the most important thing. For the students I try to accept at Merrimack, at the end of the day, I'll tell you a little trick. We're about fit. I'm more interested in a kid who's visited us 17 times once comes to Merrimack, and it's a B minus kid than a kid who's an A from Wellesley High School who never visited us. That kid from Wellesley who's never visited us, applied to 10 other schools, is getting nothing from us in terms of scholarship. That kid who's come 17 times and wants to be part of our community, and I know wants to be there, if that kid can't afford to go to Merrimack, I'll make sure it happens, right? And so it's a way of thinking. It's a way of thought process. I do not believe in the rejection model. I believe that it's just a bunch of craziness in higher ed. I believe that I want people who want to be part of our model, want to be part of our success, and that's why our retention rates are high. That's why our success rates are high, is because ultimately I want people who want to be part of that institution, who want to be part of that school, want to be proud of that, and will go off and do great things in their lives. And it's just a different way of thinking about college admissions. I'm not into all the numbers and all the crankings and all the other stuff that people do, right? We read every single application. We spend time. I spend time. I go to every open house. I go to every single parent event and things that happen. I will sneak through and send family members through the visitor program so I can know what's going on. And I spend a lot of time with my students. I have a couple town halls a semester. I have a town hall every semester on food. Every semester I meet with the students, I talk about food. For 2 hours I talk about food. And every year I change the menu. I drive our food service company crazy, right? Because that's important, and I try to solve those problems. So, you know, that you can do that on a small campus. I like that. I mean, I really like the people part of it, and it makes a big difference. But that's how we look at students. So it's, you know, so you know, we want kids who can do well academically, but more than that, I want a kid who really wants to be there, wants to be part of our community, doesn't want to be in a school. You know, we're not an urban environment. We're completely different than Northeastern. So if you applied to BU Northeastern and BC at Merrimack, your mother probably went to Merrimack and that's why you applied. Odds are, you know, you'll get in if you're a good student, but doesn't mean you're going to get the money or what you need to actually come. But that kid who really wants to be there, this is our first, they'll get that. And it's just a different, that's why we're booming. That's when I came to, we've doubled the enrollments, we're doing really well. I mean, Merrimack is doing extremely well compared to our small competitors at the schools. Really struggling. There's just an article in the paper in the Boston Business Journal last week about the school and what I'm doing, and you know, it's just different.
Well, that's great. Well, with that, I think, Chris, I'd like to thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.